my name is Carl Soule, and I provided some of the editorial support for Billy Fox. Working on Only the Brave was my entry into working for Hollywood. I've been working for Adobe for over 10 years, kind of moved around a bit. Came to the Hollywood team last year, and have really dived into a lot of the Hollywood workflows, which tend to be different from what you usually hear people at Adobe talking about. And what I mean by that, Adobe provides a complete set of tools with Creative Cloud. We provide enough tools that we have many independent people that do a little bit of everything. You can use Audition for doing your audio. You can use the Lumetri panel in Premiere for doing your color grading. Hollywood is based around the idea of having everybody working in their specialty, best of class, and being able to move from one platform or one part of the production process into a different part of the production process. It's a bit different, and in many cases, they're using a wide variety of tools inside and outside the Adobe Creative Cloud. So with the Hollywood market, we actually do a lot of work. We have a separate set of engineers that are based in the Los Angeles area to help build the workflows necessary inside of tools like Adobe Premiere so that we can work effectively in this market and enable people to move in and out of Adobe tools very seamlessly. And it's what's helped build, when you see things like Deadpool being edited in Premiere, Only the Brave being edited in Premiere, the Hollywood team is helping to drive that. Now, in some cases, we do provide these tools in kind of an early state to a particular Hollywood film engagement. Billy mentioned that Only the Brave was the first using the project locking feature. The best thing about this is we do not do something special for Hollywood and everybody else gets a different piece of software. Everything that we do on the Hollywood team, these features get rolled into the next release of Premiere Pro, of After Effects, of Adobe Audition. And so by doing this, it's always making the software better for everybody worldwide. Now I'm going to take just a bit of time here and kind of go through a couple of small features. I'm going to be using a lot of terminology, again, kind of driven from a Hollywood workflow, as far as special ways of getting files into Premiere with metadata. I'm going to be talking about some of the features that the Hollywood team in particular has added dealing with color workflows. Kind of one of the things that we would like to introduce is the idea of not having to bake in color into the dailies so that people can see what the footage is going to look like, what the cinematographer had designed on set for the footage to look like, and keep that in a modifiable format that the directors can continue to kind of play with this and then be able to export something out so that the final colorist knows exactly the direction that we need to go. So we've been working on some ways of doing non-destructive daily color workflows. I'm also going to talk about just some nice new tools that we've added dealing with visual effects, particularly working inside of Premiere. We added a new feature in Premiere to enable just kind of a utility text layer on a video clip that moves with the video clip. In particular, if you're marking out visual effects scenes, it's just a nice, small, handy tool that was released. It's coming up in this new release. Then I want to get into turnovers. Now, turnovers is when I am taking a copy of the sound edit and handing that off to the mixing department. You know, Billy mentioned with Only the Brave, we're working with a 5.1 mix directly inside of Premiere. It's a 6-channel layout going through an amplifier into a really wonderful edit suite for a full 5.1 mix. The final sound was done by Skywalker Sound, and obviously we need to be able to accurately translate what Billy did and hand that off to the team that's going to do the final mix down. We also do, there's some new features dealing with EDL workflows that have been added in the past year, including actually translating color information in an EDL file so that if you do have certain color information from the dailies, that actually will go out in EDL format if you're going out to do online finishing. we're starting to see people using Premiere as a conform tool as well, because in many cases you can edit in an offline format such as ProRes, DNX36, or DNXLB. But we have the ability to work with most of the major camera formats out there. RED, 6K, 8K footage can be linked back to an offline edit in Premiere. We even have support coming in this next release for the new Sony XOCN format. So I can show you a little bit of that. This is a brand new format on the camera that was just announced last week, the Venice camera, which is Sony's successor to the F65 camera. So while we're always looking at workflows for general purpose use for the one-stop shop person who's publishing videos on YouTube, we have a very strong set of tools for that. Just know that we do build in these industrial strength features into Adobe tools as well. So they've given me a few minutes just to kind of go through and talk about some of these special workflows. So I'm going to kind of dive in, and I'm going to start by talking a little bit about ingest. Now, in many cases, people ingest their files directly from a memory card directly into Adobe Premiere. In the case of a lot of Hollywood workflows, there's a whole process and a separate set of tools that do that actual ingest from the camera. They take the files, they make a copy, they make an extra backup, they make a third backup that's immediately taken offset and sent to a vault someplace as an extra safety net. And in a lot of cases, they're adding things like a first pass of color, and they spit out these dailies files that get sent to the assistant editors. There is a file format that's actually used for containing metadata information. This is something called a .ale file. So in many cases, these onset tools actually create an ALE file. An ALE is a human-readable file that can have a wide range of different types of metadata associated with the clips. So here I have an example of an ALE file. There are many different categories in here, different columns of information, but I can go in and I can get some idea of what's going on in here. This will have things like the sound roll name, the shot and scene information, the name of the camera it was shot on. It can have the director's information. So we want to be able to bring this metadata and have this available in editorial. An ALE file also is very handy because it enables the clips to be automatically named scene and shot information, so that I'm not looking at A001 underscore. I don't have to go in and manually do that in Premiere. You can. But an ALE file, if the people doing the dailies can generate one of these, it really, really helps. So to import an ALE file, all I simply have to do is double-click. Oops. Go in here. Here I have my ALE. Now when I import this, the clips do come in offline at first, but very quickly I can link these up to my footage. Now, once I've done this, I can have clips that have custom file names. So in this case, I have a clip here called Scene 15. I can also have custom metadata columns within my project. So if I bring this open here, we'll just go into the metadata display. There are a lot more columns in the metadata display that we've specifically added for these higher-end workflows. So for example, I'll bring in scene and shot information, sound roll information, key code. If this footage it comes from a 35mm film, we support key code information. And then we also support specialty color information. ASC CDL values, this is a set of simple numbers that can be applied to put kind of a first pass of color on set. It reminds me very much of the old school, tweaking the knobs on a proc amp. When in the video world, CDL values are an easy way of bringing information over and applying color. So I can go ahead and check these boxes here to have that information available in my project. Now, if I come over here You can see I've added some of these columns. I've got my sound roll information I can sort by. I've got scene and take information that I can sort by. And then I also can see these special color values. These CDL values actually come through as metadata. They're attached to these clips. Not so important for editorial work, but later in the process, when I am sending this out for final finishing and conform, having these values show up throughout the entire pipeline makes it much easier for the colorist to get a starting value exactly where they're going. Now, if I look at these files, I'm just going to take a set of these files here, and we'll throw them down on a string here. You'll notice that each of these files actually has an effect applied to it automatically. By bringing these clips in, Premiere has detected that these clips have a CDL value associated with them. A new feature that we added for the Hollywood market, each of these clips actually has a special effect called the ASC CDL effect. Now this is, looks very complicated for an average person, but these are the CDL values that are defined by this American Cinematographer Association to make it very, very uniform as you're moving from application to application. These are the values that you can go in and tweak and modify to create a color look. Premiere will automatically apply these CDL values in a very lightweight effect. Here's the raw footage as it's coming in. You can see nothing is baked in. This is the effect with the CDL value. As the cinematographer on set, he used CDL values to maybe tweak them on camera, or use a CDL effect from maybe another show that they've done. A lot of different ways CDL values can be used. These are not only stored in the effect, they're stored as metadata. So as I said before, these will now pass across in an EDL and other types of exports later on in the process. Now I want to talk a little bit about second system audio, because there's a lot of questions people have about how to link up audio and video using Adobe Premiere. The way we do it in Hollywood is using multicam. That is true even if we just have a single camera and an audio clip to marry together. Using multicam to do it gives you a lot of flexibility on how to sync this up, how to sync up your audio, and it also works as a batch process directly inside of Premiere. I can take a folder of dailies and the sound rolls, select them all, and say, make multicams, and it will go through and make all my multicams. It will align the audio and the video into these multicam groups for me. So if you're doing a feature, if you're doing anything with second system audio, highly, highly recommended to use multicam. There are other methods of doing it in Premiere. They're just not as robust. And the other thing that we have also done is worked very closely with audio houses going out of Premiere. We have the capability of making sure that the file names are flattened and the correct file names go across when you're sending your audio out for final mix as well. So use multicam. I'll just show a quick example of this. I've got a series of 3 cameras here and a sound roll. I can go ahead and take this and choose Create Multi-Camera Source Sequence. Now I have the ability to sync using timecode, of course. I can use in and out markers. That always works great. We have added a new feature here where we can now do sync based on sound timecode. Now this again is dependent upon using that ALE, having that metadata transfer across. I can go in and I can add the sound roll information and have that separate set of timecode information embedded in my files. Now I can use that as a synchronization point using multicam to sync on the sound timecode if it's different from the picture timecode. As a worst case scenario, I also have the option to choose audio, and this will go through and actually listen to the waveforms so that if the individual cameras have audio, it will listen to that, match it up with the sound roll audio. And multicam is smart enough, no matter which method you use for this, it will automatically mute and get rid of the camera audio and only use the sound roll. It detects if you're using a WAV file as one of your multicam clips, it knows that that must be the audio you must be working with. Now, once I do this, and I've already actually gone through and done it here, I end up with what is called a multicam group. So this clip here is my multicam. You see it has a slightly different icon here, and it does behave a little bit differently. I can actually double click on this to load it up in my timeline, and I can begin to cut this in, and I can double check my sync here with my the clapper and everything to make sure everything works good. But something that you can do with our multicams that are actually makes them kind of unique, I can take a multicam, right click on it, and choose Open in Timeline. So if you've ever done sync based on like sound timecode or timecode and you find that it's consistently 5 frames out, you have the ability to come back into a multicam at any point in the process and actually slide the video and the audio, make adjustments and changes to the clips within that multicam group if you need to do some resyncing or you just notice that the audio is slightly out. Or if for some reason you can set this up in interesting ways so that you have, you know, just the A1 audio coming in, but maybe on a particular clip you want to change that to, you know, A4, a separate microphone that was recorded on set. A lot of different options, a lot of flexibility using multicam. Okay, now I'm using a feature here right now dealing with multiple open projects. So I just wanted to call this out because this is something new that we did design around a Hollywood-based workflow. I can just have multiple open projects like I have right now, where I just have each of these different panels here is actually a separate project file on the disk. And I can just click on each of these and begin working on them. If you're working in kind of a Hollywood mindset, we have this option of nesting a shared project within a main project. And so this is something that we introduced here at the show for the first time. The team has been hard at work on this for a while now. So we're super excited about it. But it's going to enable people to break up large projects. Billy showed that timeline of the entire project, but he also talked about the idea of, you know, editing on a scene, editing on a reel, being able to keep the scenes independent of each other, and being able to pass off something to the assistant to work on. Using multiple open projects and project locking, we now have a really robust workflow for doing that. If everybody is editing the same media in the same location, it's very easy for an assistant and a lead editor, or a lead editor and many assistants, to work together because everything is stored in separate project files. If I'm editing it, I click the lock, it goes green, I have edit rights on that clip or on that project now. Nobody else can open that and make changes to it. When I need to hand something off, I click the lock again, it turns red. I still have read-only, I can still look at it, I can still pull clips from it, but I no longer have to worry about the changes being made in the other room. If I need to see those changes, there's also a new menu command for refreshing a project. I can go through and with a project selected, it's grayed out right now because nobody has made any changes, but you can see refresh all the projects. By doing that, it'll update and I can see the changes. I don't have to close it and open it up again to see those changes update. All right, talking about some of the visual effects workflows, I'm just going to grab a clip here in one of my projects. I can probably do this on the trailer here. Many times visual effects artists need to have certain markers. If you've ever watched behind the scenes footage or you've worked in this industry long enough, you know about seeing like the 4 corners and having all the file names, timecode information, and so on and so forth. Using the existing title tools in Premiere creates the challenge that it means that you have multiple tracks on the timeline. And many editors do not want to have to deal with that. So we borrowed something from Adobe After Effects and we added a new effect that's simply called Simple Text. Now, this is not something that you would typically use for doing, a title that you would want to, display on the air or something like that. But if you just need to have some kind of a marker, maybe over here in the corner, I'll just drop that down into the black here. We'll get rid of the black background. And now I can come in here and say fire temp sequence, and just simply have a little bit of text showing up over on the side. I could stack 4 of these effects and have those 4 effects up in each corner. And again, this is something that will move with that file. It's very unobtrusive for an editor like Billy because they do not have to take and edit for a stack of 4 layers to be able to use this. So very small thing, but definitely helped with the workflows that we see in Hollywood on a regular basis. Now let's talk about turnovers. How do we take and move something from editorial over into audio mixdown? We do have workflows working with tools like Pro Tools. I can take a sequence at any point and choose to export that sequence into an AAF file. Now, some people are still using OMF. OMF is an older file format. It's been deprecated. It's no longer being developed. AAF is the replacement for it. If you're using modern versions of Pro Tools, we highly recommend AAF. And every release we've done, we have added additional AAF compatibility and just reliability. So from here, I can choose to send out my audio. We have a couple of options in here that can come in handy. You really have to know your audio post house and ask them what they want as far as these checkboxes are concerned. The first option is actually to take any audio effects that you've used in your timeline and actually render those in and bake them into your sound. Some houses really don't want that. Some actually don't mind having a copy of it. But in a lot of cases, they also want to have a clean copy of the clips without any effects. So your mileage may vary depending on the post house you're working with. So using AAF, we have a really nice workflow. We're able to do turnovers and send the audio over to Mixdown in other tools. Now that said, I do want to point out something that we introduced in the last release of Premiere and Audition. I also have the option within the Creative Cloud itself to choose Edit in Audition Sequence. And I'll tell you why this is really interesting. If I've done a lot of keyframing of audio, typically when you do AAF work, you're flattening clips down. A lot of the keyframing, different effects, you can just really bake in the various effects and also provide a clean copy, a wet and a dry version. But the actual effects themselves don't translate over. If you use this new option inside of this edit dialog box, this is audio clip effects, audio track effects. We can now actually transfer the settings directly from Premiere over into Audition for doing the final mixdown in Audition. So virtually nothing is lost. And Billy talked again about that idea of not having to do the work twice. We're really trying to engage the industry with Adobe Audition and show them that the interoperability that we have between Premiere and Audition means whatever you've worked on, whatever temp sound mix you've done in Premiere really does become a starting point that's fully modifiable when you get over and you start doing your mixes in Audition. Now, the industry today majority still uses Pro Tools. So we always want to make sure we have a good, strong interoperability workflow working with Pro Tools and other third-party audio tools. But since Audition is our own, we thought we'd enhance this somewhat and give people the option to use Audition. Now, talking about color workflows, if I start to play around with color, and let's just grab my sequence here with some of Jason's interview here, and I'll go into my, my color workspace. If I start to do some temp color work using the Lumetri tools inside of Premiere Pro, maybe I'm just tweaking these values slightly. I'm just, brightening the scene up a little bit, or maybe making it warmer or cooler, depending on the mood. If I want to create something that I want to be able to hand off to a colorist and say, hey, these are the changes I made inside of Adobe Premiere, we do actually have the ability, a lot of people miss this, you can actually export the Lumetri settings. What you've created inside of Lumetri can be stored in an external LUT file that could then be handed to the colorist as something to, just a kind of a starting place, saying, hey, this is the color data that I used to do my temp color work. And again, it's one of those things that they may want to start from scratch, but I definitely like the idea of giving them kind of a starting place so that they can then work from and make it even better. Now, I mentioned this idea of doing conform work. Premiere works with such a wide variety of different file formats. We're always trying to add additional file formats to work from. When you start looking at the list of all the different types of file formats we work from, there's not much out there that we don't actually cover and work from. It is possible now in Premiere to go through and do changes to the sequence settings. So in many cases, people will take an initial edit. If they're editing in 1080, it's possible to come in and actually modify these values in the sequence itself and bring up a 4K sequence, a 6K sequence, and begin the process of conforming back to the high res. You can start to either relink your files, take everything offline, relink to it on a new sequence that matches your original footage, and it actually becomes part of the conform process to just do that work in Premiere. You can have assistants or specialists making sure that everything translates across. But that way, all of the effects stay live and wet in the timeline. You don't have to bake anything in at that point. And then Premiere can do things like export out to DPX. Now, one last thing that Billy talked about here before I run out of time is the idea of being able to export out to a DCP file. Now, Premiere has the ability to export to a wide range of different file formats depending on where you're going out. For screening purposes, we can do H.264. We have a wide range of presets for that. Many of the different broadcast specifications, if necessary. For feature films, for doing film screenings, Raptor DCP, the DCP file format, Digital Cinema Package, is the industry standard to walk into a screening room and say, here is the DCP that I want to work with. Now, we do not do the encryption function of DCP. We create a valid DCP file, and it is possible if you have the encryption software, you can then encrypt and wrap it so that it will be encrypted. But we actually encrypt DCPs relatively quickly. Again, feature film length work, can take 6 hours or so. So it's about 3x what your frame rate is. There's a couple of small tricks dealing with just making sure the audio is in sync. We've got some documentation that talks through some of that. But by having the ability to create the DCP file directly, natively inside of Premiere at 2K resolution, and there's also an option for licensing. You can rent a license if you need to export out a screener at 4K. There is a way of doing that as well. But in the box included with Creative Cloud, you can do as many 2K DCP files as you want. And I forget the total on Granite Mountain. I want to say it was 15, 20. 20 different DCPs created directly out of the post team, instead of having to go out, do a turnover to an external house and create those DCP files, which, as Billy mentioned, you continue to edit for 3 days, and then you go and watch an older cut of the film because you couldn't keep editing up until the screening. So we definitely helped to change the workflow there. Everybody, I'm out of time. I'll be around if you have any questions, and we'll be doing this. Billy will be back tomorrow, again, if you missed the last hour here. But thank you guys so much for coming. And